In line with the um, subject of good spirits, representing a plane of consciousness, a world of beings who are progressing towards goodness, through goodness, to transcendent awareness and enlightenment, then this here is going to be a step in terms of maintaining what it is that we do that could be holding us back, or spirits, what it is that can be done in terms of practice. And in order to better apprehend the process of purification, it's good to understand that the solution, if there is a solution, is to recognize what it is that we do that we tend to suffer in terms of habits. Habits, programs, tendencies. And so it's important then to speak about programs. If we're talking about programs, that implies inherited programs that are passed down through the blood, reinforced by the blood, reinforced by culturing. Family life really is the main source of the reinforcement of these programs that we are part of the continuum of for the rest of our lives, for the most part, until we see those programs as a problem, or see those programs as perhaps useless beyond the point. So we need to know what is useful for us in terms of our progression, materialistically speaking, or spiritually speaking, or transcendently speaking, or creatively speaking, depending on where we are in the field and what our needs are and what our purpose is. So in this case, we're talking about programs, and we see that our emotions, firstly, the body is a programmed vehicle. It's programmed. It has basic biologic needs, and they run pretty smoothly for the most part. As long as you're in what is considered normal health, then your body should be functioning quite normally. Breathing is functioning, going to the bathroom, genitals functioning, everything in the stomach's functioning, heart's functioning, brain's functioning, muscles are functioning, nerves are functioning, bones are functioning, everything. Heart, it's like normal. Breathing is what we would call normal, that is to say, not a problem, not perceived as a problem. So assuming your body and your basic state of consciousness is not perceived as a problem particularly, then we will get to what the programs are that we would have to call games then. Programs is games. Okay? And this is something you need to know for yourself. What your programs are doing is either playing a game on you, or you're using the program as part of a game that you're willing to play, or you've agreed to play with yourself and or with your family, or with others. And so in this case, we're talking about games. Programs equals games. What games are we playing to feel good? See? So then feeling is a game, and good is a game in this case, right? Because we're, as the ego, materialistically speaking, doing something for a purpose. And so we need to understand to what degree are we being used by the programs of being good or doing good, right? Because in the pure spirit realm, in the sense of the higher spirits, the goodness comes from something that is not called goodness as such, but it's more the heart. And as we were speaking in the last talk, speaking about doing without doing, so before we can get to non-doing, we have to be aware of what we are doing in terms of what's showing up in our programming, see? In terms of what our blood dictates, or what our culturing in this case dictates, because culturing is programming, but then programming is games. So we're learning games to play, success and or failure games to play along the path of life. And what happens is that people become these games, and you believe that that's the only reality you have. That's the only thing to identify with, is the games you play, looking for the results you're programmed to think are the results you want and you need. And basically we see all these things that are recommended by society to include education and marriage do not always produce the best results for peeps. So we have to understand then that many of the games that we've inherited, that we play for win or lose purposes, don't really work for us beyond the point. And this is what coming to terms with spiritual nature is willing to look at, see, these games. That's what spiritual nature is, the willingness to look at and see beyond these games what is real, what is not real, what is material, what is programmed as, let's say, an emotion or a thought pattern, and then what is spiritual is something beyond all of that at the same time. So this particular talk then is about the games of the levels of reality, games of agreement. And this purpose, in terms of the talk, is to help the individual become more responsible for what they might be otherwise, or who they might be otherwise blaming for what happens to themselves, because we're born into a situation where we're cultured into a schizoid condition, basically, that there's self and other, that there's inside and outside, there is duality, and there is duality, but we need to understand what that duality is as a crippling factor or as a bridge to happiness. So we have the physical level of programming or games, and then we're talking about vital games. Vital games means the eating habits, sleeping habits, see? Survival habits, see? Being afraid, being, let's say, afraid of the dark, being easily spooked, and I would call them Santa Claus and or the boogeyman programs. And so these are inherited programs. These are games that are being played upon us. So that in the spiritual works, they call it, well, these are spirits, these are entities, or they're certain kinds of circuits. See, fear programs, which more than people believe have much to do with how you operate as a human being in society, how you show up as an individual in some cases. And we're talking about your inner life is determined by these programs. And beyond the inner life that's determined by the programs, we have spiritual practice, which is the recreation of these particular circuits and the demon circuits or the good and bad circuits of habits and programs that satisfied less than an enlightened, let's say, purpose or goal or mission. And so we have the physical programming that we've agreed upon because you're in the body. We're now going to a point of view where you have agreed to take this birth, you've agreed to survive, and so you're here with all of the baggage that this means, and coming to terms with, at some point, balancing this out, having a deeper wisdom understanding, that sometimes you get through your wisdom inherited through, let's say, society relative to religion, and sometimes you have to depend upon your direct experience, as a native does, for whatever true wisdom is for you as an individual. So going beyond the physical, obvious games that are being played in terms of our bad habits, eating habits, sexual habits, sleeping habits, and basically, emotional karma and control. This brings us to the plane, the respective plane, the astral plane of emotions, which, because of our attachments, because of our need for pleasure and pain, we are then stuck in all kinds of other games relative to ourselves, relative to other peeps, relative to our family, relative to society. And we see these games persisting. We see the force of these games, these programs, these karmas, these tendencies, these bad habits, if we can call them that, and also good habits. So we want to be open-minded about this. We're talking in terms of spiritual understanding and spiritual wisdom. We're talking about all habits are there to be used for good, let's say, or for advantage, for something positive, for the benefit of others perhaps, and or be used by the habits because they have a life of their own. Remember, we're talking about blood and we're talking about continuity, and so this implies ancestral influence, which is a theme we have to keep coming back to, because a lot of people think that what they're suffering is who they are, when in fact it's not who they are, and they never stop to think about who they are and who they might be, or where they might begin, or where they might end relative to ancestral or past programming. This also applies to relationships. Relationships and family situations that are created as a result of the same continuity, the same family line, and the programs, the games that are consistent. And perhaps some of these are survival, and so they're excusable and they're tolerable and all of that. But people wake up as a result of their own experiences and their own pressures, their own suffering. They start to wake up to what is really much more specifically true to them. And in this case, we're talking about going at odds with the family programming and now becoming a more awakened individual. And that brings about or precipitates changes of view, changes of attitude, changes of intention, changes of direction, changes of purpose, and all the rest of this is part of it then. And so in addition to, say, coming to terms with where the family, let's say, as a dominant or controlling or governing influence, and we're talking regarding ancestors, we mean grandparents. We want to be able to honor them, of course, but then we have to say, no, listen, that's the way you did it. This is the way that it needs to be done now, because this is my experience. And so these are, I guess you might say, conditions that have to be somewhat balanced out between people as the growth, as the spirit moves a person to evolve more into an individual. Apart from, but relevant to, of course, extending from the family, but apart from it at the same time. So it seems like a dilemma, but it's not a dilemma, because you're basically born to grow. And we're not going to put a limit on what that growth is, because we need to grow into a human being, and then we need to grow into an elderly person, we need to grow into spiritual being, and then, this is all part of the process. So we have to be open to all levels of growth. And especially now, the emotions. Negative emotions, positive emotions, feelings. Where do they come from? Whose are they? Are they ours? Are they someone else's? Are they siblings? Are they parents? Are they grandparents? Whose emotions are these that are troubling us today? We assume they are our emotions because they show up within the structure of our body, mind, and our perception. See, they're coming through, but we're not checking the blood in the same way that we need to check, let's say, the feelings and the emotions and the thoughts we have, which are all part of the same continuum. See? We think that we are thoughts and patterns when we have borrowed. That's what culture means, to take on and influx and infuse ourselves with all of this data, which is so massive. We need to find out what is specifically true to our individual purpose. And this is true relative to the physical body, which we borrow. Sometimes the body is diseased relative to ancestry, has problems as part of the continuum. Sometimes the heart is bad, sometimes the brain is bad, sometimes the muscles, sometimes there are these issues and problems. And it's the same with the astral body of feelings and emotions. And we're also including past experiences, tragedies from the past that come in and haunt us and create fears about death, fears about this, fears about nature, fears about sex, fears about eating, fears about all these things. And they have nothing to do with us. They have nothing to do with the individual. So it's the individual's responsibility to take a stand for what could be true for them, apart from what they know is the ordinary sort of cultured family, river bloodline of karma and programs that no one questions. Here in terms of practice, we need to question because it is the nature of the spirit to know. See? You need to know for yourself. See? Spirituality means waking up to knowing for yourself. See? You need to know how to know for yourself then. And what is true for you, the individual. And so as we continue in terms of the physical fact of our nature, being a body being, being a physical being, and all that means, and also being an emotional being. It becomes more complicated. But as we move up the ladder of possibilities, it seems to become more complicated because you're relating to other people and you're borrowing their emotions. You're feeling everybody else's emotions. So where do your emotions begin or end when you are taking on everybody's emotions and not sure where you fit into this whole thing? Are you really everybody's emotion? You're not everybody's body. You're certainly your ancestor's body, but are you everybody's emotion? You have your own feelings, but what are they? Where did they come from? How necessary are certain feelings when they come up? How true are they to the moment? How do they inform you? How do they make you happy? How do they liberate you? How do they warn you? How do they wake you up? Moving on, beyond emotion, we come to the causal body, the causal plane of memory. So we have emotion, but we often don't remember where the emotion's coming from. And here we have memory, the causal plane of functionality, which is called in the traditions the time track. And there, if we have access to the time track, which the unconscious has complete knowledge of, you can see and know everything in terms of this life. If you're willing to see and know, if you're open enough to know and see what you need to know, then it can be given to you. It's a hall, perhaps, of records. Let's call it a hall of records that's available to everybody. Some would say it has something to do with the Akashic plane of psychic and ethereal records. It may be related to that, it may not be. It depends on the individual. So we have within us memories. The idea, of course, is to be able to recognize, are we being used by negative memories, positive memories, bad memories, and to what degree they obstruct what we're wanting to do and needing to do for ourselves. Or can we create new memories? The idea is, do we transform? Can we rework certain memories? And we have to say yes to all of this. Because memory, as a structure, is a solid, relatively speaking, which is dissolved by the light, which is dissolved by the heat, and bearing the wisdom, say, yeah, there are no memories. We can also say there are no memories. See? Where do memories come from? They're stuff. See? They are stuff, and so they are created of something, which means they are dissolvable. See? They are perishable. They are, let's say, burnable, transcendable. And so we need to know this, that as an individual spirit, you have the ability to really clear your slate completely in this moment, in the snap. See, like that. No past. And that's a paradox, because yes, you do have a past, but that's relative to the body and emotions, which there's validity there, but then there is no. Right now, there is no emotion. See, right now, there is no past, there is no time. So there is nothing. So between the extreme of the karma and the extreme of the realization of timelessness and nowness and here-ness, there is a lot of room for potential growth, transformation, waking up, and moving on. So going from the causal body relative to time, space, time relative to the past, the present, and the future time, if we want to call it that, the space that we are creating relative to what we're going to be doing in the future. This is important to see how we are part of the creative pattern and the creative force of what our future is, which is really, for the most part, extending the present and thus continuing the past, unless we deviate from it, we variate from the norm and start to create something completely different that we want to be drawing from as part of our future experience. So that requires creative intelligence and creative effort. See, transformational intelligence to say, well, if I follow this track, doing it the way these people in my family have done it, then I'm going to wind up like this. I don't want to wind up like this, so I have to make changes here and now. So this is good. It's a creative opportunity for the individual to wake up and see that, well, they also have a chance to step away from the blood karma and the blood spirits and the ancestral influences and move on to something more creative, that is, bring themselves into some kind of creative or spiritual practice that provides a better, more predictable, more acceptable result for them as time goes by. Then you are creating your life, or maybe recreating your life according to what your understanding is in terms of waking up to programs and games that are being played and unnecessarily, see, against your purpose of creating, transforming, being more, being freer, being happier as a result of what you take from spirit directly. And so we're moving from the causal plane of memory as a material plane, actually, to the mental plane. And so we now put the searchlight on the games that are being played relative to our thinking patterns. See, ideas that we receive, things we've heard, that form structures in our head. Structures that can be very positive, very useful. Let's say positive reinforcement, if we can say that, but they're still structures. And we have to understand the structures, the mind forms are still structures. And the spirit is no structure. See? No structure. It's formless. And so when we speak about inspiration, that means this light comes in and moves us and enables us to lift above, see, our so-called gravitational structures, our human structures, or whatever they might be called in terms of, what we see and perceive it to be. And we need this inspiration. Sometimes we need to get away from things. You need to just drop out of the stream of, let's say, time and space, activity and obligation, and go on a vacation perhaps, just to break the pattern so that you can refresh yourself. So we need some refreshment. Of course, the spirit is not only available to you when you recreate. Spirit is available presently, under the worst of conditions and under the best conditions. You can stop on a dime and say, no time, no space, no problem. And it'd be for real, because we are spirit first and foremost, So we have the ability to flip into the clear light of the soul state in a second. Zero. That's practice. Regardless whether you're dealing with physical problems because of your agreements to suffer accordingly, or emotional problems because of your agreements to suffer and learn accordingly, or because of the causal plane in your memories, and you agreed to suffer and now you want to change the game and not suffer certain memories and go beyond that. Fine. And then you have your mental body, your concrete mental, which are mental patterns, ideas and patterns which of thought rather, that you have inherited, that are familiar to you and your people, your family, and or your culture. And if you extend that to education, then what you take on there, you might use 1% of it, you might use more than 1% of that for your purpose when you feel you know what that purpose is. If you have been able to see clear to your individual heart purpose, your individual life purpose, and your individual spiritual purpose, then of course the power of what that is can be added onto you at that particular time and space. In the meantime, if you're entertaining, as most people, only culturing, only culturing and only the stuff that you're typically, ordinarily, conventionally hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, tasting, eating, knowing, and so on and so forth, entertaining, not really attaining, but entertaining, then of course you are not ready for the true spiritual. Regardless of what your beliefs are, you're not ready for the ascent as implied in the true spiritual, the rising up, the inspiration, see, be above and beyond what your past is, and working from that. See. So we also want to move on to beyond the concrete thought to the more creative thought. And that is also true of every individual, but not used as such as an opportunity or a vantage point or practice until it's made very clear that everybody is part of the creative nature of intelligence, that we are creative intelligence, that we don't have to suffer, we don't have to be stuck in any particular body's time or space, game, programs, or whatever we want to call it, habits, tendencies, and so on. Culture, see. We are not culture. We are born into culture, not to be culture beyond a point. So as long as it serves our lessons on earth, and our purpose is to become cultured and learn lessons to become a certain kind of productive, happy human being or social citizen or whatever it is, depending on what your country is, whatever is expected of your government. Once you're able to attain that, then there's much more. See, there's much more. And the much more is right from birth. There's much more at every point. There's always the spiritual. There's always the transcendent. There's always the soul. There's always the clear that co-emerges with everything else that we appear to be and that we indulge because of whatever it is that we feel obligated to indulge or agree to, socially and karmically, by programming. So we're all of it. We are the world, and then we are also that which is not the world. We're the no world. And we need to come to terms with that. And so when we get to the creative intelligence, then we're dealing with the world of ideas too. And this is something we need to work with and work through because we are burdened by ideas. We are suffering the ideas of other peeps, whether they're religious or political or scientific or artistic ideas. We take that on, and it's not necessarily true of us because it's written by and performed by and conducted by other peeps. So what business do we have in truth to be taking on all of this other stuff and then acting like, well, we know something when we don't know? Okay? We know what we've been educated to know. We know what other peeps know. Maybe they don't know either. So you have to understand then that the spiritual path requires that we know for ourselves, for truth, see? Not just belief, not just stories about Jesus or stories about Buddha or stories about masters. You have to come into the light yourself, beyond stories, beyond beliefs, beyond faith, and know beyond any doubt, see? And we're talking about knowing beyond about, see? We have to go beyond aboutness. So you know about this. You got to go beyond knowing about anything and everything, because Spirit is the event right now that is crucial to your existence. Spirit is right now. It's not later. It's not somewhere else. It's not in the Middle East. It's not down in the neighborhood church any more than it is right here now. Pumping your blood, right? Beating your heart, right? Living your breathing right now. This is what it is. It's life, force, present, absolutely truth right now. See? The divine is present. Without it, you'd be dead. And this is something we need to know. It's urgent. It's realization. It's critical. It's on the spot. Right on the edge of life and death right now. Always here, presently. It's always now. It's never anywhere else, not in any other time. It's always now, because that's the truth of spirit, is nowness. The level of creative intelligence enables people to understand all ideas, all teachings, all works, all ologies, all isms, as they are. Not particularly from God, but perhaps at best about what God could be or what it is. There is no atheistic view of things here. The divine is the divine. This is what it is. It is the all there is. Because it's perfect, it's sublime. Let's call it cosmic nature and transcendent nature. Doesn't matter what you call it, it is what it is. It's breathing the heart. So we know that it's got to be great. And we know that it's got to be divine because we're allowed to live our lives. This is consistent with the realization of what the source is. And so we owe it to the source because we are the source. We're living it. We're extended from and we are going back to, that means it is the source. Everything is the source. Call it whatever you want. It doesn't have to write anything. We have to get this straight. It's not about time, space, energy, or matter, so it's not about planets. It's about something more profound than what makes us feel good. See, the teachings about planets, the teachings about geography and locations, the Middle East, the Middle West, the Middle North, the Middle South, and all the rest of that, Middle Earth, whatever you want to call it, middle heart, middle brain, all of that is very, very nice. Very nice. And whatever the source is just wondering why anybody's making a fuss about anything relative to location. The only location is here. The only place is being right here. This is it. Now. The only time is now, not 2,000, 200,000, 2 billion years ago, whatever it is, 2 zillion years ago. So it's present. It's always only present. We have to come to this kind of radical understanding. We have no power. See, anything else is going to scatter your forces relative to time, space, energy, and matter. And these dimensions of consciousness or the universe. It's not the point. The heart is the point. It's present. We have to get to the heart. So getting back to the point of this conversation then, relative to games, there is no teaching. There is no gospel apart from love that matters. And that's because right now you're living as a result of this. It's not what you think, it's not what you've learned. You can't learn it because it is what you are. It is your core, it's the heart core already. Now, there can be conversations about the heart core and we say they're on point. See, we are heart beings, but that's not what you hear. You hear people are Christians, they're Buddhists, they're this, they're anti-this, they're atheists, and all the rest of it. We are fundamentally heart beings, and part of that, to the point. Apart from beliefs, apart from ideas, apart from programs, apart from family bigotry, family prejudice, family judgments, family ideas, we all come from the same, so it's all the same. It's a hogwash. Some of it's good. We take and carry and treasure and hold precious that which is good from the family that we know is universal common sense and works under all conditions. See? Because we're heart beings, we're not racist. We're not fascist. We are heart beings. See, first and foremost. Very simple, very basic, and always true heart beings. See? We're able to see the good, appreciate the good, we're able to see what isn't good, appreciate it all in the same stroke. See? Without too much emphasis on difference and much more emphasis on the total, the oneness, which is most important to us as spiritual beings. Speaking of the creative intelligence and all the wonderful things it can create relative to the function of genius in the world, all literature is part of this process. See? And a lot of egotism is also part of this process, which is not bad. It is what it is. And you have national egotism and you have racial egotism, and it is what it is. But it's not enough. See? It's not high enough. See? It's not high enough. It's not forgiving. See? When you talk about the humble examples of somebody like Jesus or Buddha, you have complete forgiveness in their presence. It's tolerance to a certain degree. It's there. In other words, love one another, in a manner of speaking. You have this kind of understanding that there's a deeper level. See? It's not a wish-wash, love one another. It's not wish-washy. It's very, very clear that is the basic law of abidance as a heart being. See? Love. It's not even love one another. There is no other. So it's just love. See? Being love as much as that's possible. And this is what we're talking about then. The recognition of being love. Not just about peeps. Wrath against those peeps. And peace and prosperity for other peeps. No, it's universal, people. This is something which is true to whatever the Father ultimately is, and it's giving, 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 giving. It's like the sun. There's no end. There's no judgment. There's no parsing. See, there's no giving specifically. There's no mind involved in it. It's wisdom, pure wisdom, and that's the light and nature of the light itself. And this is why we need to understand that we, as humans, programmed, yes, in terms of beliefs. And the intention behind it is very positive. So it's good. It's a good step. It's great to have your culture and your traditions. It's great. It's a great step, however. We need to understand that we are not just the earth. We are the universe. And so we're talking about having a much bigger consciousness than the particular and the specific, right, that we call, let's say, local. We're talking about non-local wisdom, non-local intelligence that is not just for the earth, but has to do with the true nature of what created the earth, coming from its void, right, its nothingness. So we need to get back to the truth of the divine as the nothing out of which all of this seemed to pop out, see? And it's still popping. It's still expanding because of what it is as the nothing that gives it infinite expansibility at the same time, see? So we need to understand the games that we're playing on ourselves are coming from culturing. And all of the culturing is not bad. We have to pick and choose that. But when you enter the crisis of identification relative to your relationship to spirit itself, not to the earth, not just to religion, but you are the source of religion. Everyone is that. The heart is the source of all of it. See, what do you do when you get to that point where it's just you and the source, and then you as source? You're going to want somebody else to be there for you. You're going to need something else. You're going to need people there. All right. What happens when you enter the perfection of what it is? You need to see somebody there. Is there other at all at that point? See, this is a good question for practitioners. And just curious peeps who are going to get to that point once they pass over. What do you need? Who's supposed to be there? What creates who shows up? Who creates that? Look at your individual human track record in terms of all your dreams and fantasies like this. How much of that has turned true? How much have all your prayers and all your best wishes and all your, let's say, proper conduct created the results that you want? Sometimes there is continuity. Sometimes there isn't. Most of the time there isn't. You have more discontent out here amongst the people, it seems. So we're not following guidance. We're not following the inner voices. We're not following the good spirits properly. When we do, then it's clear riding. See? It's clear sailing to a certain degree. See? Despite the changes, despite the karma of the family, your blood karma, which is going to tumble in no matter what happens, there's clear sailing. That's the way the spirit is. The spirit is not touched by the material, is not affected by it. See? Yet the material can be affected by the spirit. So this is a mystery, but this is a beautiful way of understanding what we have at our disposal in terms of our freedom and liberation, potentially speaking, in this moment. Who or what could be closer to Source than you are right now? You.